Hello everyone, my name is Steven and welcome to Storytime. Today we're going to be reading some malicious compliance stories. Tales where following the rules can lead to some just desserts. And let me just say, if you're not already subscribed to Storytime, please consider doing so. But with that being said, let's sit back, relax, and listen to some captivating Reddit stories. You can just use the office's Wi-Fi. Or alternatively, how to attempt being a Chad and cost your company thousands of dollars. My work involves me having to install hardware in all of my employer's assets. This makes me fairly unavailable for all my other responsibilities, but it only happens on occasion, so it's normally no big deal. It only gets costly if I'll be away for extended amounts of time. As it so happens, we acquired another project a couple states away in New Mexico, so I needed to go on site for a week or two to get all the assets in line. I drive the 14-ish hours to get on site and arrive on a Monday only to find out that my cell provider has no towers in the area, so my phone is effectively a high-tech Rolodex. I tell them I'll need them to pick me up a little prepaid phone on whatever network works best in the area. I'm not picky, I just need a functional $100 phone for the next 2 weeks. They tell me they'll have it waiting for me in the office Tuesday morning. The thing about my job is I typically answer to no one besides the owner of the company. I know my job inside and out, I know who I need to talk to whenever I need something, and I'm dang good at what I do. I'm not a complete but I'm used to my employer giving me whatever I say I need because they know that if I want something, there's a reason for it. Enter our problem. The project lead for this project moved over to my company when we bought the project out. So he feels like he has something to prove. When I arrive on Tuesday morning, I ask the supply tech for my new phone. He twirled his thumbs a bit and tells me he was instructed to tell me I need to talk to the project lead. I thought this was odd, but figured maybe he just wanted to introduce himself. I enter his office and my first impression is that this might be the smuggest looking dude I've ever met. I've long learned that my first impression of someone is usually accurate, so I mentally buckle down and prepare for a poop fest. He skips over introducing himself. I assume because he is so important I should have read his autobiography at some point, and immediately jumps in, "You the one wanted a phone?" I nod in affirmation, and before I can speak, he dives back into his monologue. "No one else around here gets a phone. Don't know why you think you're special. If you need internet, you can use the office Wi-Fi." Rather than wasting my breath explaining things, I decide that I just shrug and say, "Okay, whatever you say." Here's where the malicious compliance kicks in. Whenever I'm on a location, they get billed by the main office for all my time, supplies, etc. This all comes out of their bottom line, but I usually work quickly so it isn't too bad. The thing is, the assets I'm installing hardware on are about 45 minutes away from the office, and I have to ensure each one is activated before I can install the next to ensure there are no errors with integration. This means that instead of just activating them from my phone and troubleshooting on the spot, I have a 45-minute drive in between every step of my job. My job now goes 45-minute drive to asset location, install hardware, 45-minute drive to office, activate. If activation works, another 45-minute drive to do next asset. If not, then 45-minute drive back to troubleshoot, which hopefully works the first time but can easily take more trips. Long story short, this turns what was originally going to be a 2-week project into just over 6 weeks. My time is not cheap, nor is my equipment. The increase in cost to his project was around $14,000 once you factor in my pay and the fuel costs. Then add however much the extra 4 weeks of paying for me to stay at a Holiday Inn express costs. I never saw this bill so I didn't factor it in, but I assume it was around $700 a week. That brings us up to an extra around $17,000. That would have been the end of it, but main office was not happy about this, as me not being available except for by email at night or when I was in the office caused them tremendous difficulty in the extra month I was absent. They ended up back-charging his project for every cost that had come along due to my absence, which totaled just under $60,000. So now his project is being hit with almost $80,000 in charges, all because he wanted to flex his authority and deny me a phone which would have cost a couple $100. That would have been the end of it, but then I'm told this morning that our newest project lead is being let go for wasting resources. All I can really say here is if your employee comes to you with concerns, you should probably weigh them and not let your ego get in the way of that. I assume this new project leader was trying to flex his dominance or whatever it be, but it didn't work out obviously for him, and being a shout out to somebody's concerns led to pretty bad results for the company. Security made us show the last 5 photos on our phone. My coworker, an absolute hero, maliciously complied at security on one of our subcontractor jobs. The customer was a manufacturer for high-end electronic components. Security was tight as a small 4-inch by 6-inch box could contain $250,000 worth of microchips. Our team was installing equipment in their facility for 1 week. A security checkpoint had to be passed every trip in or out of the building. Mr. Security Guard, Chad maybe, decided my coworker, Steve probably, was more suspicious than the other 4 techs. So every trip in or out, not only was Steve made to dump his entire contents of his backpack out onto the table and go through it, Chad required Steve to show him the last 5 pictures taken on his phone to prove he wasn't stealing secrets. This is all fine, except Chad lets everyone else through without any sort of inspection. Steve is trying to stay positive, but obviously this is eating away at him. Steve tries to be overly positive and also a bit snarky with comments like, "Thank you, Paul Blart, for keeping America safe," which busts up the rest of our crew. Then, Steve has the idea that'll free him for the rest of the week. Wednesday comes along, Steve is overly scrutinized on our way in as usual. As we head to security at lunch, Steve says he has to go to the bathroom. He comes out a few minutes later, absolutely giddy. Chad Blard, mall cop, stops us on our way out and asks Steve to see his camera roll. Steve gladly hands the phone over. Chad is greeted by some very peculiarly angled shots of Steve's beehole. "What the freak?" Chad throws the phone down on the table. "Oh, sorry, I thought I had a hemorrhoid and wanted to see how bad it was. Is everything okay with my pictures? Is the facility safe?" Chad never checked Steve's materials again. Good on you, Steve. I'm not sure if there was extra detail as to why somebody was picking on Steve specifically, but this was a very weird power move to get back at Chad, and I'm glad it seemed to humble Chad a little bit and knock him off his high horse and stop whatever BS reason it was that he kept checking Steve's phone and backpack and whatnot. "But sir, you asked for a soda." For context, I am currently a 37-year-old openly gay male. This took place in my early 20s. I was working for McDonald's at the time in the drive-thru. Loved that job. So, on one of my days off, I went to a now-defunct bathhouse in Portland, Oregon. A place where gay men go to passionately hug one another. Met a guy, let's call him Bruce. Bruce was charming, witty, cute, and all around fun to be around. We dated for about a week when I suggested he come on by and see me at my work sometime. It would have really brightened my day. He said sure, and I was happy. The morning he did show up, he had 3 other barely clothed twinks, a term for very skinny and thin, often feminine gay men, sitting in his car. Given some of them were wearing towels from the bathhouse, it was clear he'd just picked them up from there. I ask how he's doing, and he says that he's elated because not only had he passionately hugged all 3 men in the car, he was going to go back for seconds. He had dropped by hoping I could help him get some free food and drinks for his friends. This entitled beehole cheated on me, told me he was going to do it again, and then had the gall to come to my work and beg for free meals for himself and all his friends. I told him I couldn't do that even if I wanted to, that it was against company policy to give away food. But we're so hungry and thirsty. Please, can you hook us up with some free sodas, hun? Additional context. So I worked once with a pretty cool manager I'll call Darren. Darren was young like me, tattooed like me, and all in all a pretty cool dude. One thing about him though was he was big into malicious compliance and would almost always maliciously comply with any request. You always had to be careful how you asked for things. Since I got free fountain drinks as an employee, I asked if he could get me a soda once. He knew I drank Sprite, but instead filled my cup with soda water. I spat it out and asked what the deal was. He said, "You asked for a soda, I got you a soda." Cue malicious compliance. Remembering how once my manager Darren had gotten me with the very same request, I grinned sweetly but evilly and said I'd get them 4 sodas and to pull forward. I rang 4 soda waters into the machine and queued it up. Darren asked me what I was doing, and when I told him what was about to go down, he just grinned and told me to go for it. I handed out the soda waters to Bruce and his Brucettes, and he lifted the lid. Seeing the fizzling drink, he put the lid back on, kissed me on the cheek, and drove a little. I counted down in my head, and almost right on schedule, the windows rolled down, and those dudes chucked the soda waters right into the parking lot and street. I laughed so hard. Bruce never came back, never called back. Couldn't have been happier. Can you imagine the gall the dude had to show up not only to admit he was cheating, but having multiple other people who I am assuming he was intimate with in the vehicle with him and asking for free stuff? This dude showed his true colors really quickly and they weren't too pretty. Good on OP for having a pretty harmless prank getting back at him and effectively ending the whole situation in a positive note for OP. Told to learn Spanish, so I did. So this takes place at the McDonald's I worked at where my last soda story comes from. When I started working there, I had barely any knowledge of Spanish outside of what I could speak in high school. Even then, it was not really enough in my opinion at the time to really say I could speak it. A strong majority of my coworkers, especially my grill team, spoke it exclusively. They knew enough English to say a few things, and this is where our story really begins. One day I was taking an order in drive-thru when a Spanish speaker started asking for someone to take their order. I did my best, but turned to the grill team leader for assistance. For this story, we'll call him Jose. Jose was great at his job, but a b-hole. You know that old saying that gets thrown around by uptight conservatives? Something like, "Here in America, we speak English." Well, that was definitely not Jose. The day I asked for his help, he glared daggers at me and said very curtly, "Forgive my Spanish. Escucha gordo gringo, tú necesitas hablar español, no más inglés. Nosotros habla español aquí, si tú no me gusta, eso tu lata salir." Which translates to, "Hey fat white boy, you need to speak Spanish. We speak Spanish here, and if you don't like it, you can leave." I had another Spanish-speaking manager take the order, and a bilingual friend of mine later told me what he said. I was pretty upset. Well, I could have taken the stance of, "Speak English, you're in the United States." But if I said anything like that, I would have been rebuked by my coworkers and probably lost a few friends. Instead, I decided to maliciously comply. I started to memorize every topping they would call out to one another and in my head pair it with its English counterpart. I listened to my bilingual manager's greet and communication with the customers, and in a couple weeks, I had it all figured out. No lessons, no computer programs, just simply by paying attention to everything they said. It was about 2 weeks after the incident. A Spanish-speaking customer came through drive-thru. I turned to Jose and said, "Listen to this." I took the whole order, greeted and concluded the conversation 100% in Spanish. I turned towards him and repeated the special order to him in perfect Spanish. He looked like I'd just mooned him. He was shocked, his jaw agape, and he stammered a second before saying, "Nah, F that, learn French," and proceeded to start talking to his grill team in French. My store manager had heard enough and called him out in Spanish, telling him what he's doing is just BS and rude. She told him she'd been in the country half the time he had and she learned English and that he should too. He told her to shove it and quit on the spot, saying no one will ever force him to speak English for a job and that he didn't need us. My manager congratulated me on taking the initiative to learn a very important skill in the job. Gave me Employee of the Month for doing so. My family, which once were based out of San Diego and were pretty fluent Spanish speakers, were also elated to hear that I'd picked up on the language so fast. Good on OP for taking the initiative to learn Spanish so he can communicate effectively with his coworkers. That's a great thing. I don't even understand why Jose is all upset about that and then trying to force him to speak another language. Like as if OP isn't good enough to be able to speak Spanish amongst them or something like that. Wouldn't he be proud of him? Wouldn't he actually like that? Considering he can actually speak to him in Spanish to some degree? I don't understand what Jose's problem was here. Short and sweet and a lifelong lesson. My son was 6 at the time and I had just bought him one of those balsa wood planes. He had a great temperament and has always been an exceptional kid, but he had a habit around that time that if something didn't immediately go right, he would walk away telling me to throw whatever it was away. So he assembled the plane and gave it one toss and it nosedived. He had put the tail fins in incorrectly. "Throw it away," he said, pouting. "I think you all see where this is going." Usually I would try to help him fix whatever the issue was. This time I had had enough. "Okay," I said. I picked up the plane, calmly broke it in half in front of him, and put it in the trash. He was mortified. "I didn't even get a chance to play with it," he said. "I know," I replied, "but you said throw it away. Words have meanings, bud. I simply did what you said." He never pulled that stuff again. Not even once. I feel for the kid just a little bit, because I know it is probably a little mortifying for them to just see that plane get snapped right in front of them, but they do have to learn that words do have meanings. They can't pull a little bit of a temperament fit at the smallest inconvenience. And I'm assuming hopefully a balsa wood plane wasn't the most expensive thing, so it might have been a good learning tool for the kid. And obviously the kid learned from it. I'm sure the kid's doing a lot better. He was only 6 years old, so it's just a little learning experience for the kid going forward. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for the stories today. Thank you so much for listening and watching the Storytime channel. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing and leave any feedback in the comments below. Thank you all again for watching and listening to the Storytime channel.